Hey, what's up? This is Raj. Welcome to the Raj Kotecha Show, #1 podcast in Dubai. And in this episode, we're talking sports. Now, before your head explodes, it's not because I know anything about sports, but my two guests certainly do. Steph and Walt, co-founders of CROSSOVR Collective. They are content specialists that make content about sports, but they also fuse it with college sports, hip-hop, and so many other aspects of lifestyle. They're two incredibly bright guys. Me and Steph go back over 15 years. You'll hear that story about how I got my bag searched in New York in an airport and how we met through that experience. And in addition to that, you'll also find out how they established their agency just at the beginning of COVID and how that made an impact on them and what the demand was in and around content trends. So it's not too deep on sports. If you're not into it the way I'm not into it, you will learn a lot because I asked some very simple questions along with my co-host on this episode, Vic. Enjoy. Okay, so welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you, thank you.
It'd be amazing to start, I think, from what it is that you guys do, and then we'll get into a little bit of backstory, how we know each other, Steph, for quite some time. So yeah, tell us a little bit about OVR.
Yeah, so OVR stands for Outside Visual Representation. This is like our Nike swoosh, so to speak. So CROSSOVR is the full name, CROSSOVR Collective. So it stands for Crossing Outside Visual Representation. So what ended up happening was Walt and I connected actually on LinkedIn and wound up speaking about content. And at the time I was at an agency called Cashmere, overseeing the BMW multicultural and national diversity account. So he was at another group called Shadow League, and they told stories from a culture narrative. And he happened to reach out on LinkedIn, which I never read my LinkedIn messages. Just happened to be reading them because it's 2 days after my birthday, so I kept getting all these alerts from LinkedIn, and he was in the mixture of that. So then
I slid into the DM.
Yo, got it. Yeah. So, but yeah, like we wound up chatting about like the content. Took a call from I think like a week or two later because I was doing some traveling, and just liked what they were talking about and was trying to work it into the mix. But unfortunately, didn't work in the brand strategy. But fortunately, it worked out for us. You know, he wound up. It was April. So this was April. We chatted. Yeah. In June, we met in person. He decided to leave his company. His wife took a new position in LA, and so then we met in person and just hit it off. You know, ordered the same drinks, didn't even know it, but then just had like really cool conversation and would go up to Runyon Canyon. If you're familiar with LA, it's a big hiking trail, but we'd go up there in the mornings just trying to stay fit and then just have cool conversations about life and work. Yeah. And he was recently, newly married, wife and baby on the way, and we were just trying to figure some things out. But
word.
Go into it.
Congratulations, you guys just hit 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So 2 years, and you're probably 6 months into that 2-year journey, and along comes COVID. So, like, Walt, how did you pivot, and what kind of problems do you solve today in 2021, heading into 2022?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I was even kind of back up a little bit before. Because we both pivoted even prior to COVID, right? So I played football in the States in college, and then began working in sports administration. So on the college side, the NCAA.
What sports administration?
Yeah, sports administration. So basically, at the NCAA is the National Collegiate Athletic Association. So when you all see like the Final Fours with the Dukes and the different basketball teams, that's kind of like the governing body of college athletics. So after I finished playing, I was fortunate enough to receive an internship to work at the national headquarters in Indianapolis. So that's where I really got my start into the business, and then from there. Moved down to like Dallas, Texas, worked for a couple athletic conferences, overseeing some of the soccer championships and football and basketball. Then worked for the Oakland Raiders as well. So now Las Vegas Raiders, they made a move. So I had a big kind of sports background, then worked on the university side at the University of California, Berkeley, and also Columbia University, doing fundraising, so raising money for scholarships, endowments, and different programs. But the one kind of thread through all the jobs and positions was the narratives and the storylines. And I also had a love for content and production. And so literally I'm at Columbia University, and we're doing a campaign for raising money for the mental health kind of institute that they're building out. We brought in a producer to kind of create the storylines and everything. But I was coming up with all the storylines and really working with all the student athletes to the point where I was like, man, I turned to him and was like, man, is this what producing is? And he was like, yeah, man, you're a hell of a producer. And like the light bulb went off. I'm like, oh, got it. I really enjoy this. And so that's when I made a pivot. Steph mentioned I worked at this company called the Shadow League. They're based in New York, and the gentleman that was overseeing or created the company, he had created Vibe magazine back in the day, and also was one of the lead executives for the 30 for 30 at ESPN. So I had a chance to like learn
What's
under
30 for 30?
30 for 30. So 30 for 30 is a documentary series that ESPN has. So they tell a lot of the sports and kind of cultural stories around the games. So they have a full kind of series around those. So the gentleman was one of the first leading executives to kind of start that aspect, because a lot of times people know sport ESPN for more of the on the field and kind of recaps, but they also stepped out to kind of create some other narratives and stories. So during that time period, literally jumped in, started working with him, working with a lot of producers and editors. And yeah, so I reached out to Steph while I was there. We were doing a series on some of the athletic directors who oversee the sport programs at a lot of the American universities. And during that time, we were looking for some partners. And Steph was working at an agency called Cashmere and overseeing the national BMW account. So I literally was going through LinkedIn, like trying to find some good contacts. Reached out to him, and sometimes on LinkedIn it's a crapshoot, right? And so yeah, he responded, and we wound up connecting in LA, and that's kind of how we both kind of pivoted to the point where we connected, and we had a couple projects around the Drew League. Steph had connected with them, and was going out of town for a big was it a golf tournament?
Yeah, BMW Championship.
BMW Championships. With Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods kind of took.
Tiger Woods.
Yeah, I saw that on your Instagram.
Yeah. So he had to go out of town, and we had literally just met, a few months ago. But he was like, "Hey, Walt, do you want to just kind of come in and take my place?" I was like, "Cool, let's do it." And so literally had a chance to kind of fill in. We worked together, kind of pulling things together, and the client was so happy with the work. Literally about 2 weeks later, we did a recap with them. And like, hey, we want to bring you guys on to oversee our brand, marketing, from that perspective. So it was like, wow. And literally had moved from New York back to LA, no job, full-time job in place, baby on the way. Yeah, it was a lot going on.
Can I ask you a question? Well, I picked up on something that you said. You said ESPN was known for like showing on the field sports, and then they transitioned to storytelling and kind of like medium or long form content, right? Documentaries, behind the scenes. We were talking the other day about my boxer friend, and you said that they do like these things prior to the boxing match. Right. Did that happen? Was that on the same timeline that when MTV evolved from doing music videos to doing reality TV to doing stories and documentaries? Because it seems to me like sports and music had a similar fracture where MTV used to be music and ESPN used to be sports, and now MTV became everything but music, and ESPN is now are there any parallels there? Because I don't watch any sports programming.
I think there's some parallels there, but what I really think is that in sports, a lot of times you have no idea who the players really are in terms of being able to really humanize them, right? And so I think you see the stats, you see the scoreboards, you hear when athletes get in trouble, but you don't know kind of the stories behind it. Also, there's a lot of historic teams that have accomplished a lot of individual performances, team performances, whatever it may be, but there's always the storylines behind it. And so I think ESPN got to the point where they're like, look, we have access to all of these great athletes and all these great stories. Let's figure out a way that we can tap into another audience and kind of again show the behind the scenes behind that. So I think it was a really smart move for them, because at the end of the day you can only watch so many highlights and so many scores, right? But I think the beauty of sports is like being attached to the stories and the players and kind of some of the magnificent kind of feats that they come up with.
Yeah, it's all right to come in. Yeah. We're about to have some wonderful coffee, guys. We'll keep talking.
Just kind of jumping back into that with the question you had mentioned about like the music and the sports thing. I think there's some similarity, but I the reason why MTV shifted and started showing content was because there was a writer's strike in Hollywood. So that's why reality TV came about, because there was a writer's strike in Hollywood. With sports, I think their pivot to content was more so because of what they've been seeing with endorsement deals. And you know what I mean? Like, because that was more of a branding situation. So it was the ability to make money, because how can you make money and sell a person if you don't know a person, right?
So what you're doing is you're almost like pre-cooking that person. It's, that's genius.
Because what happens is like, like when you're on television, you're making your money off of advertisement and revenue, you know, like around the commercials and all the other things. So how do you get that if there's no other additional content? You know, there's only so many live sports. You know, if you have, you know, I think, you know, basketball went on a strike.
Sure.
You know, so it's like, all right, well, if you have no basketball, what do you do if there's no basketball? You can't show any games.
Yeah.
So it's more reasons like to know, like, and trust the athlete. Because prior to that, they'd get endorsement deals based on their points or their performance on the field, whereas now it could be for their personality or their values or other things they believe in.
So I think it's twofold, right? I think so. Yes, the individual athlete being able to kind of monetize the endorsements, but also just from a TV standpoint, network standpoint, there was a huge explosion in terms of now we have more TV windows and slots to fill. And again, there's only limited calendar seasons when it comes to the sports seasons, and so they're like, okay, how do we get more content and we can fill that with advertising windows to build it out? So I think that's where you started to see a shift of, okay, it's cool to have these games, but we also have to have more to bring people in.
Do you think if there wasn't those strikes, it still would have happened?
Yeah, because you had, remember, like you had satellite TV at that point and internet. So the more, like you said, the more outlets you have, the more content that's needed. And you didn't have the internet at that point.
Yeah.
So it's like
you just had to fill it.
You just had to fill it. And it's just like, if we're going to have all this access and these platforms, how do we monetize it?
And when you're looking at the sports star, you're looking at the personality, brands tie into the personality, the people tie into the personality, and that's where the commercials come in.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So, how are you guys finding Dubai?
Man.
We've got a couple of extremes. We've got Steph, who's part of the furniture, and Walt, who's Walt's first time. So let's start with Walt, because that's going to be more interesting. And then we'll go to you, Steph. But yeah, Steph. So forgive me, Walt. It's been 2 days, 3 days here.
About 3 days.
Initial thoughts.
Oh, I love it, man. It's a blend and mix of different cultures. I feel like also, one of the things I love as I'm driving around the city is just knowing that over the last 10 years, this place has really fully developed. Looking outside the window right now, there's another building, being built. And I think as a creative and also as a person that's always thinking about like, okay, what's next? What can we do? It's an inspiring city. Because you look up, literally, you see the birds, and you're like, wait a minute, that started in someone's mind. Just like, okay, this is going to be the tallest building, right? And they literally put the things in place to make it happen. So, like, I see the parallel of, like, what we're doing from a content standpoint, and just as a person, as a man, of, like, okay, like, there's nothing that can, like, literally, if we put our mind to something and we have the right team in place and approach things the right way, there's nothing that we can't do. So I think that's kind of what I get from, being here in Dubai. And outside of that, I mean, the food is amazing. Food is amazing. The people are great, and also just you feel the warmth. People from literally all over the world, right? And it's an amazing feeling. So again, I'm still fresh, and I'm sure there's a lot of different neighborhoods and places I haven't had a chance to see yet. But I have a great tour guide. My guy Steph is a local.
Steph was Mr. International before Pitbull, man.
Right. Exactly.
He's local, yeah, man.
No, I'm glad you feel that way, and I really picked up on that point about Burj Khalifa, because one of the reasons why I can't leave the downtown area is because when you step out your building and you're looking at the Burj Khalifa, that puts you under pressure as a hustler. It's like, this can be done. This is 838, I don't know, whatever meters in the sky, nearly a kilometer in the sky. It's like, it's one of the flagships of ambition. It is for the Middle East what the Empire State Building was for the longest time in New York and the US in general. So I'm glad you enjoy it. And then you, old man, Steph, back how many times now? Fourth. Yeah. How you feeling? Because you've seen the evolution, right?
Seen the evolution, but I mean, I feel like now you're starting to get people who have, even if you're an expat that moved here, you start to get that local vibe from them as well. You know what I mean? Like, where it's just like they're taking and harnessing the city. It's also one of the few cities where, from a financial standpoint, people have whatever they want, but there's still a sense of pride being here. Because it's like, you look at other cities. I mean, I'm from New York, but you look at New York and it's just like you're losing culture, because everything is not made for you to actually, if you're a local, to actually be there. You know what I mean? And it's just like you have so much gentrification that's going on, whereas Dubai, it's almost working in reverse. Like they're accepting culture because they're trying to grow the city.
Damn, that's a good point.
I like that.
It's
the opposite of
it's the opposite.
It's the complete opposite. And you said welcoming. I mean, you said that the expats living like this kind of local life, but it's easy to do so. Because from the moment you land, you kind of go, okay, I can make my own way, I can make my own space, I can figure it out.
Exactly.
Everything's available to me, and people are all in the same boat. It doesn't matter which country you're from, everyone's trying to do the same thing, be the same person. So that way it's very welcoming and quite easy to slip into like a local lifestyle.
And I think you get another 10 years and it's skyrocket, because like then you actually built a community here that actually will have that intrinsic sense of like, this is my city now, you know? Again, like you start pricing people out of a lot of other major cities. I mean, it happened to Venice, Italy, you know, it's like no locals actually live there. It's you have to be a millionaire to live there. But you got to think about it. It's just like there's no creatives. But that's also the hard part about being in a city that's so expensive or that has access to things. It's like, what's the aspirational goal? So from a creative standpoint, you're kind of limited. You know what I mean? Like we had this conversation earlier when it comes down to creatives, right? Like if you're doing music or if you're doing different things, like if you're starting off as middle class or, you know, upper class, when you think about music, it's about the struggle. If you're not struggling for anything, what do you aspire? You know, what's your aspirations? You already got it. You know, and also how do you still relate to the rest of the world? Because if they're hustling and struggling, it's just like you're making music for who? So that's also the hard part with a city, where it's like every city has its positives and negatives, but Dubai is probably one of the few cities in the world. I think it's the #1 city now.
Yeah, you know, I'd love for you to speak on this, and I know we probably will end up with how we know each other as the last part of the podcast, but you made a wonderful point last time. I said to you, you know, Steph, you know, I hadn't been to the US for a year and a half. I know that Dubai's relationship with the hip hop community continued to evolve, and I was like, well, where are we now? Yeah. Where is Dubai now as a city in relation to the culture and hip hop culture? I was like, are we near Hong Kong yet? Are we near Singapore yet? Because living here, we understand the difference between Singapore, Hong Kong, and London, and New York, and Dubai. We know that we're not in that league, but in the perception of culture, where are we? I was like, are we in the same league as, you know, Monaco? And you said
higher.
Higher.
Because the thing
Craziness.
is this.
We spoke about this.
That's bonkers, because Monaco is, if you use Monaco as the example, that's like your upper echelon of
but for the States, you got to look at it like this, ready? If you look at hip hop, how many times is Monaco mentioned? How many times is Singapore mentioned? How many times is Hong Kong mentioned?
Basically never.
Never.
You got songs about Dubai. You know what I mean? Like,
well, you got Drake calling
Dubai shit.
Talking about the leaders of the country.
Leaders of Dubai being their first cousins. Like he's like, they're like my brother. And some random Dubai record came on. You know Shiggy? Yeah. So Shiggy has a Dubai record.
Does he?
It's called. Well, he's like the second person on the record. It's called "I'm in Dubai on a jet ski." And I was like, well, that's my actual life. I was like, that's incredible.
That's the name of the song.
Yeah, it starts off okay.
I mean, you got Travis Scott.
The Kiki guy,
Dubai Ship by Travis Scott.
Yeah, Travis
was that his
Scott.
record?
Yeah.
I was wondering who made that song.
But also too from a travel standpoint, and Steph and I talk about this all the time from a cultural perspective. You know, a lot of African Americans, especially women, have that, you know, discretionary income where they want to go see the world, right? And Dubai is one of those top places because of, you know, one, you get a chance to, you know, get on the water. You have a chance to, you have all the luxury that you're looking for. All the shopping is here, the food is here, but also just being welcomed, right? And feeling safe in the city. I think those are things that, you know, we struggle with being from the States, and sometimes it's not always that way, right? And so I think those type of things, plus you have that aspirational lifestyle here as well. When you when you pull up to the hotel and you see the Ferraris, the Lambos, and all that stuff, regardless of what it is, like the perception is like, man, Dubai is. It's like, man, I want to be here. Like, I don't know what's going on or how all that's happening, but I want to be there. So like even us, you know, sharing with some of our colleagues and folks that we were coming out to Dubai, you know, to kind of celebrate our 2 years, but also just work-wise, they're like, man, really? Like, man, I got to get out there. I got to have to, you know, so it's really building now.
So actually on that point, because you talked about lifestyle and the perception of kind of what the lifestyle is here, the people and the culture and everything, what about from a business standpoint? Like, not specifically, but like again, the perception, and we can get into the specifics.
No, I mean, but that's the gift and a curse for you guys, because people, when they're thinking about, you're going to Dubai, if it's from an artist standpoint or somebody who's trying to get a job, the first thing they're thinking is, I'm about to get fucking paid. You know what I mean? And it may not even be that way. You know what I mean? If you're trying to hustle, like if you're dealing with somebody who's trying to create a startup here, and that's going to be the hurdle for you guys. Like, you're not going to get a lot of startups here that can bring in that raw talent because you can't afford it. Because the perception is, if there's somebody coming from, a UK or the US, the moment they hear that there's a job opening, if you're a startup, and it's strictly from a startup standpoint, they're going to be looking for the biggest dollar possible because they're thinking it's already there. Like, I'm going to get paid. But, it's just one of those things, like, from a standpoint, after you look at everything that's been happening in the U.S., also, it's like, again, it's aspirational, but one of the things as a Black American or just a person of color in America, you realize that America loves your culture, loves your music, loves your food. They don't love you. And here it's different. Like, you can go out and you can go to like any nice restaurant and they're playing hip hop. But the difference factor for me personally being here is that I've never felt any racial issues here. And as opposed to just taking your culture, they want you a part of the culture here. You know what I mean? And in the U.S., I feel like they do everything possible to make you not feel welcome, but want your shit. That's the thing. I like. The more I leave the U.S., the more I hate coming back.
Wow.
It's interesting. I don't know if we've had this conversation before, but I was in Chiang Mai in Thailand a few years ago, and we were out doing something called I think it's like, when you go on the zip lines. In Chiang Mai, it's called, I don't know, whatever it's called. Anyway, so we're there with a bunch of tourists. Obviously, they pick up people from different hotels, and off we all go. And there was this Black lady there from Atlanta, young lady, and as is typical, I made friends with her because this is my background. And we get to talking. I said, and I said, you'll forgive me for asking. And I wasn't speaking to her as a Black American. I was speaking to her as an American. I was like, you'll forgive me for asking, but Chiang Mai is not like Bangkok. It's not like Hong Kong. It's a little bit more off the beaten track. I said, you don't often get many Americans venturing out here. And she goes, oh, I love it. She goes, I love to travel. She goes, since I've left university, all I did is I paid off my university debt. I didn't upgrade my car. All my friends were getting car loans and getting nice cars. And then by the time I paid off my university, I'd been out of the buying a nice dress, going to the club energy that I thought, okay, now I can buy myself a nice car and start that journey, or I can spend it all on travel. And I just remember being really shocked. I was like, hang on a second. Because of my relationship with Black America, I understand that over a 5-year window, if there's no collective consciousness in Black America, but there's certainly enough that there's a tipping point that changes the outlook of the whole world. And I was like, maybe it could only take 10 to 15% of Black America to say travel is cool, and we'll live on a different planet in 10 years. Because
100.
Once they endorse it and say this is the new shit, everybody's gonna be like, well, I want to be like them, as you rightly said. Not in a fair way, not in a balanced way. They're not showing all the love, but they want to copy all the Black trends. Do you ever see that world whereby the Black American stamp of approval is for travel, and now all of a sudden that's the hip shit to be doing, 100%. And then the whole world changing?
I think it's happening now.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, it's happening. I mean, and that's the piece where I really feel like the days of having the most flashiest car, having the all the material things, it's starting to really fade, because now with Instagram and everything else, like you see it
like
over and over and over, right? And it's almost like, man, the new flex is like, man, we're out in Dubai. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Like honestly, like we're literally seeing we're going to another side of the world. We're expanding our horizons, and we're seeing new shit. And I think just as your value as a person, as you continue to grow, especially when you have your kind of priorities straight, it's like, man, I'm more excited about like seeing some new stuff, meeting some new people, trying some new food, and for me, that's what fills my spirit, And I think you're starting to see that switch.
And what's interesting as well about travel is it requires money and time and a certain amount of administration. Like, you need to be able to be bothered to plan your flight, get your passport, book your hotels, read your TripAdvisor reviews. So like anybody can go to their local like Chevy store and buy the car. But to actually transport yourself overseas and then to do a trip big, you can't just do it for 4 or 5 days. You've got to go do it for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whatever. And you need the privilege of time. And time is the real wealth.
So even before you make all those purchases, you also have to be comfortable enough to get out of your own skin.
Yeah.
And travel, because a lot of people have never even, you got to think, like, to leave your own state or neighborhood for some people. I mean, like being in, you know, whether it's in New York, Atlanta, Florida, in LA, those are huge markets. But I've met people who, neighborhood celebrities, have never even left the state.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't own passports, right?
Yeah, a lot of people don't even have a passport.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from an American scale, Americans have, I think, are people with the least amount of passports, of you know, big nations. You know what I mean? It's like, there's people like, oh, like, you're willing to go out there? And then it's the perception, too. Like, so then you have the media issue. And that was my big thing, like, with the Middle East. It's like, growing up, and it's like in other conversations we talked about earlier, it's crazy how media perception in America can, like, skew your vision on the world. Like the first thing they tell you, oh, you don't like America? Well, go back to Africa if you're black. You know what I mean? But then they show you all these negative images of Africa, but they don't show you all the wealth that's there. Mm-hmm. So it's like, they want you to stay stuck there to make up the workforce, but they also don't want you to feel comfortable enough to feel like you're a part of the environment and the community. But then you also have, you know, other aspects of, you know, from a travel perspective where it's literally like, if you're going to go out of the state, like, just for somebody to feel comfortable leaving their own neighborhood half the time, like, there's people that are just like, I don't know what to do, or like they've never even talked to people from other ethnicities, you know. Like, you've got, like, cities, like, again, like, looking at LA, New York. Like, New York is a little different because everybody lives amongst each other. But, like, when you go to places like a LA that's more spread out, or like a Texas, you know, you literally have cities of people that are all one ethnicity. So you're segregated, but the city has a large makeup. So a lot of people just don't even know about other cultures, even if they live amongst other people.
What was the snapping point for you? Oh, sorry, forgive me.
I was gonna say one last thing too. I think people always forget about, like, the middle of America. Yeah. So yes, you have the New Yorks, the San Franciscos, you have the big cities, but
the coastal elites.
Exactly. Right. So within that, like, you have a lot of people who literally, you know, live in different parts of the country that don't have access to the New Yorks and to the LAs and all that. So, like, for them, being able to go to the New York and LAs is something that's big, but it's the mentality and the mindset of being able to step out there. And I think just taking risk as well, right? So I think the people who are successful in life, and again, I'm not saying everyone, but for the most part, like, there's some type of risk that you have to kind of take. And I think travel is a part of that. It's like, man, I'm going across the globe. I don't, literally, if something goes down, I don't have anyone to call here immediately. But you also have to have that confidence in yourself, and also confidence in the greater good of the world, right? Like, if I'm putting good stuff out, I'm going to a place and I respect people, hopefully I get that back and have a good experience. So,
and sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying one other thing, because I got off on a tangent before. So one of the points I was going to make about was media. The media perception in America, media, they control everything. So when you think about, and the point I was going to make earlier was, if you look at every movie that ever plays Islamic prayers, what's taking place right after that? There's a bombing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, so you've already made every person in America, and then especially middle America, afraid to talk to anybody who's Arabic or who even looks, you know what I mean, Middle Eastern or brown. You know what I mean? And they do that for everything. You know, and that's the other hurdle that you have to get over, because it's all about media perception of wherever you go. You know, I mean, think about, like, back, like, you know, when our parents or grandparents were coming up. You look at it then, it's just like, oh, the Japanese. You know what I mean? And it's like Russians. Pearl Harbor, the Russians. And then you see all this media of or pictures, kids hiding under desks from the Russians. You know what I mean? But then, like, you build this stigma of people all around the world.
It's funny that for our generation, I know the black backstory and the Indian black story is different, but for us, we didn't have much choice. No. Like, when the colonies left Africa, they told our parents, you can stay in Africa or you can come to England. And it was basically like toss of a coin. Half of the family were like, well, we like it in Africa. The other half were like, we'll take our chances on England. It's interesting for us as well, because we're the we're the third generation to move. Because our grandparents were born and raised in India. Then the colonies moved, well, we can argue how it happened, but it was somewhere between slavery and moving humans around, that they were like, let's go to Africa. Then from Africa, they find the trading options. You know, Sanjay Vadera, his dad used to take cotton through the jungle.
Oh, did he?
And he was like, we're worried about, like, lions. Yeah, it's just wild stuff. And then from there, they then moved to England, and then from England, that generation's born, and then we were born there, and we're here now, and there's not much, as it stands at the moment, there's not much of a case to go back to England when
as
you
it
can
stands
live in a country like this.
specifically right now, yeah, the way that things are going on in the UK and specifically London in my case, yeah, there's no real reason to go back. Yeah. You know, one thing that you guys said earlier is, you know, the safety and stuff. So, you know, I've got a kid, so I want to be here for lifestyle, safety, security, money, weather. You know, like that's kind of my goal, and I'm not going to get that in many places in the world. So
for sure.
What made you hit the road originally, Steph? We said the other day when we were out that you've basically been traveling like me, basically your whole adult life. What was it, when you talk about the norms and the media influence and everything in the US, what is it that made you say I wanted to hit the road at a young age? Were you actively traveling when we first met?
Yeah, so I grew up traveling though. I think the switch for me though, or not the switch, the thing that was ingrained for me is that it was always accustomed in my family DNA. You know what I mean? Like everybody, like I'm first generation on my dad's side. So being that, and then also my mom, you know, being mixed and everything else as well, and adopted. So it's just like I've always grew up traveling. So growing up, like my family's from Bermuda on my dad's side, so I have family there. Have family in the UK. Had family in Paris and Madrid. So summers, that's where I was. You know, go to see them. But then again, also living in New York, you know, my next door my neighborhood, like I could literally tell you, like in maybe a 10 apartment radius. I had about maybe 15 different ethnicities, like nationalities, not even just ethnicities, but nationalities, like people who weren't even from there. To where people are like, oh, how did you come across that? How did you know, how did you speak to someone from there that's just like lived with them, you know? Like I think I told you this before, like growing up, like I had two friends, like these two girls I grew up with, they didn't have a brother, so they used to give me the Rocky every year.
Oh, yeah. That's dope. And you are part Indian as well, right?
Yeah. So my great-grandmother, her father was from India, and her mother's from England, and then she was born in Barbados, and then moved to Bermuda.
Nice.
After she got married,
So speaking to everyone, segue back to how we first met.
We met in the airport.
Steph was working TSA. He was the guy that allows you or not to pass through customs.
And you were a person of interest.
I was a brown guy in 2003, 2004, passing through New York. I don't remember having my bag checked, but according to the story, that's what happened, right?
Well, you had your bag checked, but I think there was a flight delay. It was like weather related, and we went to go get a massage.
Oh yeah, we did this last time. Okay, right. So what happened was I was with a colleague of mine. We were heading up to Toronto from New Orleans, and we'd just been down there for a conference pre-Katrina. It was a wonderful time over on Canal Street, and they do Mardi Gras every weekend, by the way, which is something they don't tell you, but that's incredible. So I had one of the wildest weeks of my life down in New Orleans, and then we were going back up, we were flying by New York, and then we sit down on these massage chairs after a wild weekend of a wild week of debauchery and conferences. And we're sat on these massage chairs, we're getting these massages with the machines massaging you. He was like, Raj, I really feel like we've got to go. I was like, we'll be all right, don't worry, it's all good. Next thing you know, we go to get our connecting flight to Toronto, and they were like, you've missed your flight. And I was like, well, this is my fault. And I was like, what do I do? This guy was technically like in the leadership team. He like worked directly for my boss. I was like, oh my God, we're going to get slaughtered. We're going to have to pay for tickets. I'm going to have to pay for both of our tickets. She goes, but it's not your fault. I saw your flight came in a little late. I was like, yeah, it did. And they were like, okay, no problem. You can go out in about an hour and 5 minutes. No problem. Just stick around here. So it was all sorted out. And I guess it was around that trip that you got asked to check my bag.
So it's like I checked your bag before that happened.
Right.
And then I went on my lunch break. So I was like, what the hell are you still doing in the airport? So then we just started chatting from there. I think at the time you had your ringtone company.
Yeah.
So it throws you back.
We had a ringtone startup, which was incubated inside a mobile phone retailer, cell phone retailer. And my job was to establish and build that company. And so part of the perks of that is that the majority of the media deals were happening in the US, in New York, and just freakishly in like New Orleans and Miami Music Con, stuff like that. And and I was going back and forth, like just trying to learn how the industry worked and what the different technologies were that would deliver like ringtone assets and things like that to people's phones. It was a very fragmented world at the time because you had like Nokia, Sony Ericsson, SMS billing, WAP in the day before it was the WAP that we know today. It was like when it was a wireless application protocol.
There's still billing involved, but
There's a whole lot of billing involved. It might be more expensive.
Yeah, it's just more than $1.50. So that's how we met. And what I love about those long relationships is that whoever you connected with, first it was a case of real recognize real, in the sense that you had no radar, you had no Instagram to check anybody out, you had no LinkedIn, which is obviously part of your guys' story. You just like, it's just like either live wires connect or they don't. And we did, and then we exchanged numbers. You said I gave you one of the cards, right?
Yeah.
The student tones cards with the little devil face.
Yeah,
on.
like a little devil face.
I remember that. I still got one of those somewhere. And then we met up again in London or New York?
London, then back in New York, and then I met Rishi, your sister, your other cousins,
Vinay. We went to eat
you
proper
out in
Indian
London.
food.
It's a family affair with us all the
so
time.
that was, you know.
And then that legendary night out with Director X.
So
Little X in New York.
Champagne and shisha.
Champagne, shisha, all black, all
great night.
That was before shisha culture as well. Like that was before all the Dominicans were up in Washington Heights and doing what they do in New York. Like it was way different. So that was a good vibe. So long time. What does obviously, like, you're both entrepreneurs, you're both traveling. What kind of, like, post-corona, you guys deal with sports stars, right? Like, mostly that play, you mentioned American football, basketball, and anything else?
Baseball,
soccer.
Getting into soccer.
The world we live in now, you know, you've got restrictions with crowds, you've got all different things happening, media consumption at an all-time high. What kind of clients do you have, and what kind of problems do they want you to help them solving?
Yeah, so I think this Instagram culture is a gift and a curse. I think as an athlete, yes, people have a lot of access to you, but because it's so oversaturated, sometimes your story and your journey gets lost in the crowd. And so, especially from a brand perspective, if you're an athlete that's looking to get connected with brands, a lot of times the narrative is not there, and so you have to be intentional about it. So, for example, everyone's into fashion. They say they're into fashion, but it's one thing to kind of be able to afford the name brand pieces, right? And a lot of these guys say that, okay, after sports, I want to do X, Y, and Z, or while I'm playing, I want to create my pieces, right? And so it's not a deal where you can just throw money at things, right? And so what we try to do intentionally is show the process. When I mean show the process, like, okay, if you want to be into fashion, okay, let's set up some time for you to spend with a designer to kind of learn how to pick out fabrics, how to kind of go through the full process of sketching and designing and then going through it. So now from that standpoint, people can literally see you like being a learner, right? And you're being educated by the process. So that kind of separates you from someone who can just go afford a $1,000 T-shirt and put it on. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing that we've been able to do is really sit down with athletes and understand, okay, what's your why? What do you want to do? And kind of what do you want the world to see you as? And then from there, we're able to kind of really set the visuals behind that and the narrative, so that now, whether it's you kind of preparing for life after sports, you trying to try different things out while you're currently playing, now it aligns with who you are. So I think that's the biggest thing is helping someone say, hey, I want to get here, and then visually being able to kind of pull those narratives together.
Yeah. So our big clientele is essentially overall, whether it's from an athlete, startup business, or someone in entertainment, is brand building. Because essentially we started off on the experiential and event side of things, but that's how we initially kind of looked at it. It was like, all right, let's try this, let's try that. And we always had in mind, content and things like that, but it was a part of other things, because like when you do events have always been so disjointed, and just the agency industry in general. Like you have it segmented where it's like you have your social team, you have your events team, and then you also have your content team. But it's just like, why are you not looping all that together, and why does that message not all get told at the same time for this 360 experience? So that's initially what we were just like, hey, let's try to just pull it all together. But then with COVID, the thing that happened was we didn't have access to events, and all the athletes and entertainers and startup brands that are still trying to keep it moving, they're trying to figure out how they can stay relevant. Because remember, we went through that weird period where, like, then when you had D Nice doing this thing, and then you had all these different people where you know, they were just making posts. And it was like, even before D-Nice, I feel like there was like a good 2-3 months where you would just see like Sanaa Lathan, who you'd never seen on social, just making posts. And you had different, you know, actors and actresses just doing stuff just to be relevant and be seen. Like, you know, you would have like LL Cool J, Denzel, like, you know, who, like, you're like, oh, shit, like they're on social now? Like, so it's like you had that lump. But then from the sports factor, it took off because at the same time that was happening, they were also negotiating the NIL, which is name, image, and likeness.
You know about this?
I know name, image, and likeness. But
these college sports kids were not allowed to use their name, image, and likeness.
I know the story.
So you had that taken.
So just explain that for the listeners.
So name, image, and likeness, essentially, like when you're playing a college sport, in order to keep your eligibility, you can't sell anything as an athlete. You can't generate income because you're a non-paid athlete. But the moment you do anything, like if you're given a gift, if you do, like, you can lose your eligibility to play. So it's always been like a scenario that's been happening because they had, you know, video games with college students, and that's why on the video games you'd only see the number and the look of the person, but you wouldn't. So they even stopped making the games because there was a lawsuit that took place where people were like, hey, like, well, you're making money off of me as a, you know, as an image. But you know,
and some context around that too. You know, on the college side, it's $1 billion industry. When you take a look at the TV contracts, you look at the salaries that athletic directors and these big conference commissioners are making. So everyone's coaches everyone's making tons of money off of literally the backs of these student athletes. And so it's been in the works for some years, and now finally it's here. And the name, image, and likeness piece of it, now as a student athlete, you can really monetize, you know, who you are. But again, right, and again, I mentioned I played football in college. As an athlete, you don't have time to have a full-time job. You just don't have it. And so the one thing that you do have access to is your cell phone, Instagram, and different platforms, right, where you can, again, attach yourself to different brands and be influencers. And when you think about these young men and women from ages almost 17 to 22, 23, whatever it is, like these are the young men and women who are actually driving culture, right? And people are looking at them, and especially if they're an athlete, they're at a certain level of status. And so now that's what's happening. Like a lot of these brands are really jumping on board, and just from, let's keep it real, like from an appearance standpoint, like they look the part, right? And so now you're seeing all this happening. And so what Steph's point is, now, like, it's like, okay, what do we do with this, right? So we kind of take like a three-tier approach, especially when you look at, you know, your football and your American football and basketball athletes. Those are the sports in college that are really driving everything. And so it's like, okay, take a look at like your hometown, where you're from. If you're playing in college at a big level, you were probably one of the bigger stars in your local region. So I'm sure that there's going to be some businesses or companies that have some interest in supporting you there. Then you look at also kind of the college market where you're currently playing. So if I'm at Oklahoma, you know, there's car dealerships or other people who are going to have interest in you. And if you're fortunate enough to then make it to a pro level, then there's going to be people in those markets that support you as well. But what people miss out on is that at these big universities, the alumni are the people who are driving all this stuff. Like, they're cutting $1 million checks, they're getting, you know, names on buildings, different things like that. So they all have a vested kind of interest. And so that's where we're like, man, if there's ways where you can be really intentional about, again, as an athlete, saying, hey, this is what I want to do, and here's what I'm looking to do. There's companies and alumni and folks you can kind of bring in to help support with this name, image, and likeness. So it's big business.
And one of the things around that too is, you know, you were getting kids who are losing eligibility by, like, not even purposely. So you got to think about it from this perspective, right? If you have a certain amount of streams on YouTube or Instagram and things like that, they pay you. You're not supposed to make any money. You can get paid by accident. Because, like, let's say you're a college stud, you know what I mean? Like, you're killing it. You make a post, and it could just be something that you do, like, because you got to remember, like, all these kids grew up with social media. That's just the norm for them. It's not like it's something that they're doing to try to make money. They're just doing it because, that's culture. Like, we talk to more people on Instagram versus anything else. So they're making these posts.
So a young fella posts a video, hits 1 million streams, he gets paid out $3,500.
Yeah.
All of a sudden he's crossed line. Did that happen to you though, Walt? Did anybody try to leverage your image and likeness when you were at university playing football?
You know what? Not for me. I was a good player, but not at the highest level. You know, but you know, some of my friends who played at some of the bigger programs, absolutely. So there's tons of stories that I've heard and we know about. And then if you even kind of peel back the layer a little bit more, when you think about like a lot of these shoe brands, you think about basketball. You all familiar with like Sonny Vaccaro, who's one of like a big shoe executive for Nike, and so like all these big. If you play basketball at a high level, there's a lot of like regional tournaments. It's kind of called the AAU system. And so as you're playing as an elite athlete, you have Adidas camps, you have Nike camps, you have Under Armour camps, and all these brands are trying to vie for finding the next LeBron, the next Kobe Bryant, or who's going to be able to aspire to that level. So they put on all these camps. So at the end of the day, too, again, like I mentioned, these are the young men that are driving culture. So if I'm able to get my sneaker on this young man that has all this following, it's going to inspire the masses to kind of do the same. So I think that's kind of behind the scenes as well. So it starts even so much earlier before they even get into college. So even you have middle school and high school kids who are kind of getting used, from that standpoint. So now it's good that the kids are getting some power back.
But then here's the two part to that, right? So now you have all these kids that are growing up with social media culture that already have their branding done before they even make it to college or the league, because you have kids that are high school phenoms that are being followed, right? How does somebody in the league who never really used social, because like if you put a 10-year on that,
this is a great point.
You got guys who haven't really developed their social, so that's why we've seen an explosion, because now they're trying to keep up and compete with the new kids coming into the league or kids that are in college that already have that branding and that that visibility. And these guys are just and then you got to think, from with COVID shutting down, all their interviews happened where? After the game. If there's no game, where are they doing interviews? So that's why we got an explosion over COVID, because of the simple fact that they were trying to stay relevant. And then now they also have to compete with an incoming class of kids that already have a following that they're not even able to compete.
Can they compete?
Yeah, they can.
How?
They can.
Going back to what he was saying, like you have three markets when you make it to the league. You got your home market, your college market, and your professional market. So you can harness that, work within those and start to build up that visibility. But again, like if you're already an athlete that's in the league, you still have that edge over the other people, because you're a notable person and you got some following. But the thing is like you also got to remember there's certain products that a young kid can't also endorse either. So there's still a lot of opportunities out there, and then also from an age factor and things like that. But
because you're right, a young person might be able to drive fast-moving consumer goods sales like shoes and sneakers and T-shirts and things of that nature, but he might not be able to influence a mutual fund. Whereas an ex-athlete might say, "Hey, put your money here for like steady growth."
And those athletes have had a fan base that has grown with them,
no
right?
question. Because every athlete has, and I hate to put it this way, but like almost a shelf life, right? When you think about it, it's like when you're coming into the league. I mean, even as a high school athlete, whatever it is, the clock starts ticking. In terms of your relevance, and also just physically, you're one injury away from not playing ever again. And so I think it's as a rookie, and what we try to do for some of the young men as they're coming into the league is like, be very intentional about this now. And I know that you maybe not get it, but like literally when you're 5-10 years down the road, the groundwork or the seeds that you plant now will be able to harvest down the line, right? And so one of the things too, during COVID, which is crazy, was that people didn't feel comfortable, shooting in person for a little bit. So we had to get creative on taking some pre-existing content that a lot of athletes had, and we were able to kind of pull these sizzle packages together. So there was pre-existing kind of interviews or on the field components, things of that nature that we would kind of blend in to kind of tell the narrative, and making sure that the right kind of narrative and music was attached to it so that it could pop. And that's kind of literally how we got our first start into the content space during COVID, because no one felt comfortable really shooting in person. So we're like, look, send us what you already have, and let's kind of pull some things together. And that's what we did. And then from there, we had some good proof of concepts of like, if we can do this based off of pre-existing content, imagine what we can do when we shoot with you guys, in person. So that was kind of the segue into what we're doing content-wise.
So speaking of some of these content successes, Steph very kindly sent me something that really was quite standout that even I could understand a little bit although for the first time I didn't really know specifically what they were talking about, but I recognized the guy in one of your latest videos, Lil Wayne. So congratulations on that. It looked very interesting. I didn't really get the sports conversation, but the music stuff was very interesting. How did you end up working with Lil Wayne? What's he like to work with? Who else was involved? And what did everybody get out of it?
So, Lil Wayne, man, I would say it's crazy because, you know, I'm from the Bay Area, so there's a huge connection to New Orleans. My dad's from New Orleans originally, so Cash Money was something I would always listen to. So one, it was a full circle moment to be able to shoot with him. Two, he's an authentic, down to earth guy. He's really a big sports fan as well, and that kind of came across during the process. And you know, doing our so the Players Day Off series that you're referencing, we're working with the group called the Players Company. So the Players Company, they're essentially a group that's derived of, you know, players that are on the NFL side, MLB, NBA, and essentially what they're trying to do is empower them to get their narratives out there. There's also a financial literacy component too to empower guys. So essentially, as we were working with them around the series, we were able to kind of, you know, Lil Wayne was someone who had a good connection to both groups, and so we were able to kind of bring him in. And then the young man that was also in there, Darren Waller, at the time was on Lil Wayne's sports agency. As one of his athletes that they represented. And so
what does Darren Waller do?
What's that?
What does he do?
Oh, so Darren Waller is a Pro Bowl tight end for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Right. Interestingly, by the way, the Raiders, the American football team, used to be somewhere else, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. They were in.
So I never knew you could move a whole team to another state.
Well,
they were in LA.
They moved 3 times now.
Oakland.
Yeah, so they started off in Oakland, then moved to LA, then back to Oakland, and now Vegas.
Wow.
With some controversy around that
Absolutely.
final move, right?
Absolutely, some controversy. Yeah.
So this guy's he's still a football player or no?
Oh yes, he is. Yeah, he's a current player. The Raiders are doing really well now. They're in this, you know, $1 billion stadium in Vegas, which was a smart move for them financially. But the thing about Darren, even if you remove the football aspect from it, is that he's overcome adversity, right? He was, you know, battle of addiction of pain pills, different things, just kind of living that rock star kind of lifestyle, right? And he hit a wall, and so he's been, you know, 4 years sober. And so he kind of takes us through that journey. And so as we were thinking about, you know, the process for shooting with him, you know, he's really big into yoga, meditation. He's into music and also into body ink and tattoos. And so he, you know, they've done a lot of different interviews around him, but we were like, look, let's position you in a way where you're literally showing the world what you're doing. And so we were able to spend a full day with him, going to Venice Beach and doing yoga, meditation, going to a pretty famous tattoo shop in Compton, and they're actually on the VH1 Black Ink show. Black Ink show. So we did that, and then finally we capped off the night with him in the studio with Lil Wayne, and he actually recorded a song that night as well. Darren did. He's also a rapper. So that's kind of an example of kind of how we shoot. It's like, yeah, you know, people may know you from what you do, but we want to show the other sides behind the scenes. So even if you're not a sports fan or a music fan, whatever it is, you still can connect with the stories.
Yeah. The whole goal really is to humanize them, right?
Yeah.
And allow people to tell stories to show who they are, because the idea of even shooting the content, when it boils down to like the original plan for what we were doing from a branded standpoint, was to show how they integrate with different brands and lifestyles. And you don't get that from an interview. You know what I mean? Like, you talk to them like an interview after a game, you don't hear about the charities they're working with. You don't hear about, you know, the different things that they're doing in their off time. You don't hear
mainstream media is just waiting for them to fuck up.
Yeah.
Shut up and dribble.
Right.
Shut up and dribble, yeah.
You know, so you hear all of the negative stories all the time, but you rarely get a chance to like hear how a guy is similar to you in life, you know, and you know, one of the things that we try to do, and that's why we say outside visual representation, is that like, yes, we can put you in line with brands that everybody already knows or that you already know, but there's also a market audience segment that follows you that is from Middle America or that's from other coastal cities or other countries that you may not even know you have. Like, for example, if you got a guy that grows, not everybody's from a major city, but if you got a guy that grows up in, you know, Middle America or that love to go fishing, you know, you got brands like Bass Pro Shops, like an Outdoor World, And you forget that because like when you start thinking about urban culture or people of color, you automatically put them into cities. But that's not everybody's life. Or if you're a professional athlete who plays, you know, he's from the Bay. You know what I mean? If you got professional athletes in the Bay Area, there's a large Southeast Asian population out there. Because it's the closest thing to Asia and the flights, right? So you got a large population of, especially basketball. You know, if you're a basketball player, you've got a large following probably in China, Japan, the Philippines. Like Philippines is the #1 sport. But people don't know that they can harness that followership and viewership, you know, and so that's what we try to focus on is creating those new lanes of influence and harnessing the following that you do have that you don't even know you're resonating with.
And what's the business model? Like, does the athlete commission you? Do you do it pro bono and then take points on follow-on business? Like,
it's different every case.
It's a combination.
It's a combination.
Yeah.
It's working with the agents. Directly. You know, because the agent is also trying to get the leg up. You know, with against other agents, so they're trying to do things to position their client to be seen in different lights. So it's working with them. Some of the athletes are hitting us directly. Because they just want to be, you know, proactive with their own career. And then you also have some parents hitting us up. And then sometimes the brand itself, because brands also, like we also hit that boom right before COVID where brands were tired of paying for viewership and all they were getting was a static post. How do we showcase our product or something being used but in an authentic and organic way? So what we started doing was we're shooting content almost like as many commercial or, you know, docu content series type of stuff and dropping it on social. So now it's like they're putting out some stuff and it allows the athlete or whoever or entertainer to stand out away from everybody else. So now it's like, cool, you can get a solid, a static post over there with a picture. I'm going to give you this content over here and I'm going to give you back scenes and I don't need to just tag you. People are going to see it.
It's dual usage. So content nowadays, you know, you can put it in a pitch deck, you can put it on your social, but it's an opportunity for people to really, you know, connect, you know, with you as an athlete or an entertainer. And I think too, the other thing that makes us stand out is that because we come from an experiential world, is that, you know, we've all seen great interviews, but at some point in time, when you're sitting and you see kind of the same background over and over, it's tough to kind of connect. And so, you know, people are visual, right? And so if you're talking about, you know, mental health, and you're talking about like different outlets, like me going on a beach and actually seeing you do yoga and meditations, like, oh, wow, got it. So not only are you talking about it, now I actually see you physically doing it. So from an entertainment standpoint, you as a viewer, you actually are able to go on that journey. And also from an athlete standpoint, now there's validity in behind it. And that's why, you know, B-roll footage is always key when people are talking, because people want to see the actual, you know, connection there. So we try to, you know, really create that.
Well, as a final question, if you are dealing with, you know, just mash all of your case studies together. So like a college student who's playing college sports and somebody who's mid-30s and looking at exiting the sport. As a blended avatar, if that person had $100 and that $100 is representation of 10,000, 100,000, a million, whatever, how would you split that $100 up? Where should they be investing it when it comes to building their brand? Is it digital, billboards, strategic partnerships, content? I know it's on a case by case, but I'm saying like super generic. How would you ratio split that $100 to ensure a long career for that person?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I will say is that as we're working with a lot of athletes and agents and agencies right now, what we're finding out is that the days of having to have an agent that's negotiating contracts is becoming so kind of cookie cutter, because there's slotting in all these sports now. And slotting basically means that if I'm drafted at a certain slot, or if I played X amount of years, or, you know, if I play a certain position that someone else's plays, I know kind of what that framework's going to be. So you can literally, you know, get an attorney to kind of be able to kind of negotiate that, right? So now there's some really good agents out there, so I'm not trying to undercut the business, but I'm just saying that's the kind of the world we live in now. But from a branding standpoint, the branding piece is your visual representation. That's something that you have to invest in to make sure that people connect with you, you connect with brands, and you're able to create opportunities off the pitch, off the field, whatever it may be. So what we're finding is people are really now investing more into the branding side for sure.
Okay, so that brand development, you know, figuring out your trajectory and your goal, right? So the first thing we tell everybody in the beginning is figure out what and how you want to be remembered, right? And what your goals are as an athlete, an influencer, as a brand, you know, especially because we also deal with startups. You know, you know, everybody sees all of the sports and the entertainer side of it, but we also have been working with a couple brands. We do brand development for a fragrance line, you know, which is done through a floral shop. We've worked with a startup tech company that does investing into real estate using blockchain technology. So that's like the non-sexier stuff, but it still translates. It's like you have to figure out who your core audience is and what things work for you and how you want to be seen and the people that you want to work with, you know, because it's put your money towards identifying what those outlets are and building that strategy. So I would say like that's probably about 50% of your budget right there up front, you know, because you want to make sure, or I would say maybe about 35, 40%, because you want to figure out at least 2 or 3 different verticals that you can, you know, integrate yourself in so that you build that longevity, because it has to be authentic, you know, and the thing is not everything you're going to do is top tier content or a major look, but the fans and people or people that you start to engage with that follow your brand, you know, that you've already reached out to, you have to keep them engaged, because a lot of people I think feel like if they just do one thing that it's just going to stick. But yeah, you might do one thing depending on who you are and the opportunity, and you got all this following for, like, let's say, you know, Raj is doing content, but all of a sudden, like, you happen to do like an episode with a group that does music, so you're like, all right, I got this whole big music following, and then the next episode you got sports, and then you just stick to sports. Well, you just lost all the music people. So it's like, how do you create a strategy so that if you don't have the big top tier looks from a budgetary standpoint, how do you execute that on your own, or how do you consistently engage with that audience that you built to keep them engaged with what you're going? Because we see it all the time where people will do something and you can have like 200,000 followers, right? And you look at the comments and the likes on there, and it could be a post where it's just like you have this whole audience of people know you for fashion, but then you're not even getting any likes on your page because all you're doing is talking about sports now. You know what I mean? Like, so it's literally, you have to create a strategy, and that strategy is not only about finding that lane and vertical, but it's also about creating consistency.
That's what you were talking about the other day. Literally what Vic was talking about.
Yeah. Consistency is key.
Being intentional.
Yeah, Vic did an audit of my social media, and he was like, it's a bit all over the place. You need to go deep on the subject that you know. But I like that, and I think I would, you know, seeing as though you answered about 30, you allocated about 30 to 50% of the budget in your answer. I think for me, the other 50% would be invest in assets that will allow you to scale.
For sure.
So in the content industry, like, get that first camera. After the camera, get the first onboard mic.
Right.
After the first onboard mic, get your first attachable lapel mics. After that, get your first tripod or monopod. Like, you know, invest in the hardware, and then people can come and go that can use it and know how to use it. For sure. And then next layer, invest in the people that know how to use it. Absolutely. Because it's almost it's funny, it's very excellent that obviously you being from the Bay Area as well, it's the home of like DIY, go to market hip hop, right? But like, and you were talking about, you know, New Orleans, which is the other, it's your counter cousin there, is do it yourself. Like, own your studio, own your distribution, be completely independent. You look at the E40s, you look at Master P, Tech 9, Baby, all these people, they put a lot of their money, although the money did come from dubious backgrounds, but like they put a lot of that money into having their own machine. And then after that, the only problem that you're going to have, or the only final challenge to face, which we all face as content creators, is how do I get the most of my distribution? Which is the game that we're all playing at the moment. So, and I would also take a part of it and put it in events as well. Because now more than ever, people want to press skin and, you know, touch and see each other and hug and
you have to
take pictures.
Well, and this is the thing too, is that everybody has access to global networks now. You know, and that was the big thing. It's like the hard part was, how do you get seen globally? And that's, you know, because you got to think, like, when we met, there was no social to like see all these people in other countries, right?
At all.
But now that's the norm. People are watching things from all over the world. But if you're trying to make an impact on somebody, you got to meet them in person. So it's almost, it's working in reverse. It's like you've maxed out everything that you've done from a technology standpoint. You almost have to go old school. Like, so for example, like if I wanted to invite you to an event, I might be able to send you an email, but if I really want to capture your attention, I'm sending you a handwritten note. You know what I mean? Like,
it's gone the opposite way, right?
Stand out.
Because like you got to think about it like this, right? Especially as a community and generation that has started off with that first, but then it moved into the social standpoint. If you got a handwritten mail, like at our age now, what does that usually mean? A wedding? or a baby shower or something that is a life-changing moment for us and growing. And that's why when you started talking about the people for traveling and everything else, like why there's like this boom of people of color traveling and seeing the value in it. Well, the thing is, it's simple. Like you're getting older, but we're also getting to executive positions.
Yeah.
So we have we have more disposable income. You know, so when you go back to like saying like, you know, that one lady that you spoke about that didn't have the car the whole time. Well, if you didn't have the car that whole time, you don't need the car anymore. What else are you gonna do? You're gonna travel. You're gonna do all the different things that you don't have to be in their whole neighborhood or local vicinity. You're gonna do all the things that you've seen on television because you got all this extra cash. You know.
Oh, I love it. Well, where can folks connect with you? Because you guys are doing great things individually as a business. Where's the best place that listeners can connect with your movement?
You got CROSSOVR.co, and that's CROSSOVR.co. That's our website.
Yep.
Or you can find us at CROSSOVR_Collective
On Instagram.
On Instagram. Our personal socials. Mine is at Mr. Steph Raw. And then
mine's WJ Brock on IG, and and then also, you know, just look out for our work. We have some projects that are getting ready to hit soon that will be on some different platforms as well. So we'll make sure to follow up with you.
Amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll link those up in the show notes as well.
Yeah, we'll link all that up in the show notes. And of course, if you need a direct introduction, reach out to Vic or myself. Vic's Instagram is
VIKMORJARIA.
Also in the show notes, along with my Instagram, RAJKOTCHA. If you need an introduction to the guys, let me know. Both dear friends of mine would be happy to do so. Walt, Steph, thank you so much for coming on the Raj Kotecha Show.
Thank you.
Oh, guys, appreciate you. Thank you.
This is
We'll
awesome.
speak to you guys in the next episode. Definitely. Spotify crew, hit the follow button. Apple Podcast, Apple crew, hit the 5-star rating and review. And wherever you listen to this podcast, make sure you hit a share, especially if whoever is listening is also into sports. Pass it on, pass it on. I'll talk to you guys next time. Peace.